What's up, YouTube? This is Hey Guys Laughing Out Loud, back again with another video. This is going to be my DS4 Pro Controller build from Beaver controllers, or Beaver Customs. I'm hoping the video will be a little bit shorter than my previous review, as there are things that I will not need to cover again and should focus more just on the controller and any comparisons to my previous Evil Shift controller. But before we get started, just a bit of a disclaimer. I just want to mention again, in full disclosure, that I purchased the Beaver controller from Beaver Customs with my own money. At the time of posting of this video, I am in no way affiliated with Beaver Customs. All my personal opinions are my own. No one is paying me for this review, and no one is viewing this review before it is posted. I'm just a consumer gamer that wants to provide consumers and Beaver Customs with my overall impressions and feedback about this controller. Now just a bit of an overview. Let's take a look at the controller and the modifications that I added. This is the actual controller here. It's the front, on the side there, top, side, rear. And before we get into the configurations, that's what this card here talks about, Beaver Customs, they allow you to send in your own custom parts, if you will, provided they're compatible with whatever build you're choosing to go with. I chose to order my own custom front faceplate, which was this Vampire Red, and got that on Amazon for $12. And I really enjoyed the grip from the Evil Shift controller. I thought they made this, or I thought they had come up with this on their own. They did not. This is just something that is made in China and is also $12 on Amazon. So I was able to buy that and my own front faceplate. But again, something to note, as I already kind of mentioned, if you do decide that you want to buy custom parts from maybe something that they don't offer on their website, I highly suggest you find out what those parts are, what controller those parts are compatible with, because there's 4 or maybe even 5 different versions of the DS4 controller. And you want to email Beaver and let them know what you're looking to get and find out if they can use those parts. I did that before I ordered my parts, and they did confirm that they work. So I went ahead and pulled the trigger. I think that's pretty much it. One other thing too, aside from the fact that the parts you may be wanting to use, whether they may be compatible with the version of controller or not, there are situations, for example, that you may not be able to use a specific part because of the specific mod that you're getting. And the example is there were some smart triggers that I wanted to use. Excuse me, not smart triggers. There were some triggers that I wanted to use, some custom triggers, and I could not use them because it would not work with the smart trigger and bumper feature that I had added in. So before we get into the overall review, I'm just going to talk a bit about what is actually in this controller. Now I went pretty much all out on this controller. I didn't spare any expense. I got everything that I wanted for the most part. So I got 4 rear buttons added in. All of them are remappable. I got adjustable, or I got the smart triggers and smart bumpers. I'll talk about that more once we get into the review of that part. I chose to keep my rumbles. They give you the option of keeping your rumbles. I like the rumbles. I like the way it feels. I like the immersion. And it also keeps the weight. I like the weight of it. It doesn't feel cheap like the Evil Shift controller. This is as light as this thing is, it just feels very cheap. I didn't like that. But that's just personal preference. I had the thumbstick on the left is the stock DS4 stock tension, and the one on the right is the extreme tension. And I'm going to talk a bit about that once we get into the review of that part. Did not get any squid grip because I had my own custom grip. The squid grip that they offer, it adds a lot of bulk to the controller, and for some of you that may be what you want. I don't want that. That's not something that I would want on my controller because my hands are not, they're not real big, but to give you an idea, each of these squares on this grid down here is 1 inch. So I'm going to move my hand more centered. So you can get an idea about how big my hand is. You know, if you look at the squares, you know, it might give you a generalization of how big my hands actually are. I don't particularly consider my hands to be small, but they're not large. I'd say they're, I guess, medium. So the squid grips, you know, I just didn't want to add the bulk. You know, faceplate, rear plate, custom, I provided that. I went with the matte black buttons for the button scheme. Unfortunately, they did not have the matte black for the home button. And let's see. Oh, and I went with my own. I went with the evil sticks on this controller because I like the evil sticks. Even though I don't like that when you know, shift over, you can see down into the rocker. Don't like that, but aside from that, they feel good. So I stuck with those. And they're interchangeable. And I got the extended warranty for 4 months. And before I get into, well, actually, let's just go ahead and jump into the review because I'll get into the other parts as far as turnaround and all that. So I want to talk about the rear buttons. This should go pretty quick on some of these categories as opposed to my previous review. I just want to point out something that I did not mention in my previous review on the Evil Shift controller is if you are using the Pro controller on PC and nothing else, you're not using it on a console, you're just using it on PC, you do not need a remap chip because you can do all your remapping, everything you need with the Steam software or DS4 Windows. However, if you're going to be using it on a console, especially if you're on a Nintendo Switch, you want that button remapping. You definitely want it. If you're just playing on PlayStation or maybe just Xbox, it's kind of iffy. You know, you may want it. You could get by without it, but it's probably not as mandatory as if you would if you were on a Nintendo Switch. And the reason why is Nintendo, you know, flips their buttons around, so it just screws everything up. They don't want to conform. So just wanted to throw that out there. So getting into the pros about these buttons, they're very responsive. They feel like mechanical switches when I press them. The distance surface between when the button is pressed and when the button is unpressed and when it is pressed is, I would say, probably about 1/16 of an inch. Versus and the button is actually only protruding out about, I can't get it to focus, but there it goes. It's only protruding out roughly about 1/8 of an inch. Now, and I've measured it. I'm not busting out the ruler just for time's sake. Now on the Evil Shift here, there it goes to focus. The distance from the Evil Shift, it's hard to tell the distance because there's this black rubber mat and then the surface of the controller. But that's 1/4 of an inch. I actually measured it. That's huge. That's 1/4 of an inch button sticking out from the controller. That was one of the reasons I had problems with this controller as far as it fitting, you know, my ring and middle finger because it stuck out so much, and why I ended up having to go with my ring finger and pinky on this. Sorry, put it in frame. Yeah, because I ended up having to use my ring and pinky finger on this, but because of my jump button is on the bottom, that's just what I'm used to, I had problems with my pinky. So just kind of wanted to point that out. Now, the buttons on the Battle Beaver controller, getting into the next Pro, they can be custom placed. And what that means is you can basically tell Battle Beavers where you want your buttons to be placed, and that's where they're going to put them. Now, there may come a point where, you put it somewhere where it may end up conflicting with another part of the controller. But for the most part, you can put it just about anywhere, and they'll do it for you. You just either take a photograph or maybe make a mock-up like what I did, and they'll get the buttons placed for you, no problem. Another pro, which is not, it's kind of a given. You can set it down. You don't have to worry about the buttons being depressed, on the controller itself, like we talked about with the Xbox Elite controller. The Xbox Elite controller, when you set it down, it depresses the buttons. Very, very annoying. Now, I want to talk about one con. It's really not much of a con. It's not the fault of Battle Beaver by any means, but I chose to get the red buttons for my Battle Beaver rear buttons. Unfortunately, the red that they offer is nowhere near close to matching the red of my front face cover. And in fact, it makes it look more orange, if anything. And I wish now I'd just gone with black. But that's okay, because at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about some modifications I'm going to have done to this controller that I would not have been able to specify or come up with until I actually had the controller and used it. But anyways, I wish I had gone with black or gray would have been fine. Now, I want to talk about one quick thing in regards to a mid. I wanted to talk about the difference between cloned and independent buttons, as somebody was asking me about that today. Just for y'all's information, all the DS4 remap chips, or even if they're not remapping or they're just adding buttons that are, cloning the front buttons or whatever, those are all going to be cloned buttons. They will never be independent buttons. And some of you are probably wondering, what's the difference between cloned and independent? Okay, I will do my best to explain as I did earlier today. On the Xbox Elite controller, the Xbox Elite controller has 4 rear paddle buttons. They don't look like this, obviously, but those particular buttons, they can be programmed to different actions independently. Like, for example, the top button here on the Xbox controller is Y. Okay, so I could have Y here, just like I normally would on the Xbox controller, and then I could program Y to any of these rear paddle buttons on the Xbox controller, the Xbox Elite controller. Now, let's say I wanted to add turbo to the Y face button. Okay, I can do that, but if I do that, the Y button that I assigned back here on the paddle button is not going to have turbo. And the reason why is because it's not cloned, it's independent. It means it can have its own separate actions assigned to it. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what are you talking about as far as actions? Well, if you're gaming on a PC and you're using like the Steam software or the DS4 Windows, you have the ability to create certain actions and whatnot, even macros, if you will, to be able to perform different things within the game. But if you're playing on a, like a PS4 or Xbox or Switch, you can't really do that unless you're using a device like the Titan 1 or the Chronos Max Plus, something like that. Then you could, well, at least on the Xbox Elite, but you couldn't do that with the DS4 controller. And that's going to be with all. So the DS4 controller, all the buttons are, any buttons that are added anywhere, they're going to be cloned. They will not be independent buttons. Okay. Moving on. Hopefully I explained that well enough for you guys to understand. Okay, we're going to get into the front face buttons. Now, a lot of these next categories will go pretty quick. There's not a lot to talk about. They do provide your own customization options as far as what buttons you want. as far as color and whatnot. And the other pro that I like about these buttons is when I rub my finger across the top, or if I shake it, it's not near as loud as what the Evil Shift controller is. I mean, listen to how loud that is. I mean, it's so, like, I'm OCD. If you guys haven't figured that out yet, I'm letting you know, I'm OCD. So, not with everything, but certain things. And attention to detail, things like that, that bothers me. But, you know, if I rub my fingers over the front faceplate buttons on the Battle Beaver, it's just like the stock controller. You know, they feel good. In fact, I actually feel slightly better than the stock, but they're quiet. And they're very responsive. Cons, honestly, I don't have any cons. I don't have anything negative to say. Just don't have anything. The D-pad, they allow you to choose your own custom color D-pad. They don't do anything special to it as far as I know. It works. Other than that, no more pros. Nothing really, no cons to really speak about on that. Now moving on to smart triggers and bumpers. I'm also going to talk a little bit about racing triggers and bumpers. Now, I had smart triggers and bumpers added to this controller. Now, some of you have already seen this, but I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate for those who have not. On a normal DS4 controller, this is a stock controller, a trigger, basically, when you pull the trigger on a stock DS4 controller, you have like a gradient pull. It's like a lever, and there's a spring in there. And you go from 0 to 10 to 20, 30, 40, all the way up onto 100% before that button is registered at 100% depression. And the bumpers are a little bit spongy. Like when you press them, there's a lot of travel distance there. So they're kind of spongy. Now with smart bumpers and smart triggers, like the bumper here, I'll do that first. It's a button, and you can hear the click. And it feels good. Like there's a nice conformation. There's not near as much travel distance there. It doesn't feel spongy. It feels really good. And the smart triggers, same exact thing. Trying to get it in focus here. There we go. So you can kind of get an idea of how those work. They're very responsive. They're very sensitive. They work really well. As I mentioned before, the way I generally play, I hold the controller like this, and I kind of put my index finger between the two, and I just kind of roll back and forth between, you know, the bumper and the trigger. And because, you know, of the way they're designed, I'm able to do both. I can either press both at the same time or one at the same, you know, the front or the rear, you know, by doing that method. It just works for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for you. But it works really nice. So now I want to talk a little bit about racing triggers real quick. So racing triggers, and I'm going to use my Steam controller to kind of demonstrate this. This was my first controller, by the way, that I bought after 20 years. For 20 years, I've been using keyboard and mouse, and I'll make another video about the evolution of my controller journey. But last March, I guess it was, I bought this controller. Before that, I was keyboard and mouse. And I liked this controller in the beginning, you know, but it was very cheaply made. But anyways, on the triggers with these, they also have a articulation of, how should I say, a gradient articulation like the DS4 stock controller. It's not, it feels different, but it works the same. The mechanics are similar, sort of. The difference with these is they actually incorporate a very similar technology, excuse me, that Battle Beaver uses, which is known as racing triggers. What racing triggers are is you have the articulation of the rocker where you pull down, and then you come to a stopping point, and then you press even harder, and then you get a button click. So that's what's going to happen with your racing triggers. Now, on the Steam software, there's actually configuration options that work really well for that type of button setup. Unfortunately, with the stock DS4 controller, I could never get it to work, so I didn't bother going with the racing triggers, and I also didn't even know about them at the time. But once I learned about them and I saw those and I saw the smart triggers, I decided to just go ahead and go with the smart triggers. I may at a later time, have them build me a controller with the racing triggers, but I've only got a couple of games that would probably benefit from the racing triggers. That's like Alice Madness Returns and Alan Wake. Those games are kind of old, and that's because they have a feature where when I pull the trigger, I want to engage the gyro, and then I want the second action from the trigger to actually fire off whatever it is I'm using. But with more modern games, the actions aren't set up that way, so it's not really needed, at least for that type of game. Now, there may be another game that's more modern that has a different feature, that you may want that for. But most of the games that I play benefit from the smart triggers. I wouldn't really need racing triggers that much, unless something drastically changes again in gaming. Okay, now getting into the cons in regards to the triggers, really not much of a con, nothing on their part, but I wanted to get black accented bumpers and triggers to match the black, face buttons and whatnot. So it's gray. It's not that bad. I mean, it's not like it's not like it's hot pink or anything. It doesn't look near as bad as this. This drives me nuts. This isn't so bad. I would have liked to have had it, but they said they weren't unable to do it because of the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that if you get certain parts, you have to make sure that they're going to be compatible either with that particular model or the mod that you're getting. And since I got the smart triggers and bumpers, it would not have been compatible to go with the black bumpers and triggers. If I had gone with the stock, then I probably could have gotten that, and that's what they told me. So not a big issue, Okay, so I think we're done with that. Now we're going to move on to the thumbsticks. Now, I'm not going to cover the physical thumbsticks, like I did before. I'm actually using the Evil sticks on these instead of the stock Battle Beaver sticks. They do offer their own. So I'm just going to talk about the actual thumbstick mechanisms, the rockers inside. Just like with the stock controller, just like with the Evil Shift controller, the dead zone on these is very good. There's very little dead zone. I know there's some there. There has to be so you can avoid drift, but it's perfect. It feels good, so there's no issues there. The second pro that they offer is they offer 3 types of thumbstick tensions for the DS4 controller, the Pro builds. Now, you have the choice of going with the stock DS4 controller, which they have it listed on their website of 75 grams of tension. So the tension, before we get into the different levels of tension, is basically how much force it takes for you to articulate the arm, in motion, whether up, down, at an angle, left to right, whatever. It's the actual force required in order to articulate it. Now, they offer 3 settings. They offer the stock, which is set at 75 grams. And then the second next level up is increased. That's 110 grams. Now, the 110 grams is actually very similar to the Xbox 360. In fact, that's exactly what it was on the Xbox 360. I don't know. I never even used an Xbox 360, so I had no frame of reference for that. In fact, when I was considering getting increased thumbstick tension on this, I was real hesitant because I don't know what it feels like. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I really had no idea. So what I did is I called my local GameStop. I said, hey, do you have any Xbox 360 controllers in stock that maybe used or something? They said, yeah. I said, okay, cool. I'm going to come down and check it out. So I went down there. I said, let me play with it for a little bit. And they were cool. They let me play with it. And I didn't really notice a big difference. There was a difference, but it was very, very slight. But what I did feel, I liked. I liked the fact that there was more tension on the thumbstick on the Xbox 360 controller, which, as I mentioned before, I said my hands shake. They do, but it gets worse with my fingers. Right now they're fairly steady, but sometimes they get like really, really shaky. And when you're trying to aim, with the right thumbstick, because that's generally what you're using. I also use the gyro as well. I use both the gyro and the thumbstick. If you're using the stock the stock thumbstick motion at 75 grams, you're all over the place because you don't have any resistance to fight your hand, and you're it's like you're taking a hammer to kill a fly when you just need a fly swatter. Not the best analogy, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. So I realized that I did want to go with increased thumb tension, but I didn't know what I wanted to go with because I liked the way the Xbox 360 felt, but I still felt it wasn't that drastic of a difference. And I was like, and also I kind of thought, well, over time, it's probably going to break in a little bit. It's going to get a little bit looser. It's not going to have as much tension. So I thought maybe I should just go ahead and go with the extreme. Then I found a guy who did a video on his thumbsticks from Beaver, and he talked about how he went with the extreme, because I was actually not sure if I wanted to go on both or just one. And he said he just went with it on the right because that's all he needed for aiming, because the left, you're not aiming with that. You're just moving around, so you don't really need it as much. And the other reason why, and this is now getting in, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself to the con, but that was kind of the main reason. So, but he went with the extreme, and I thought, you know what, I'll just go ahead and go with the extreme, because over time, I'm sure it's going to kind of wear in a little bit. It's going to loosen. And I've gotten it. I played with it. I love it. Like, I love it. It's got such, it's really good for my shaky thumbs, especially when I get into that moment. And it's got a really good amount of tension to, not be all over the place like I would be, with this. It takes a lot of force. I shouldn't say a lot, but it takes a good amount of force. And I don't feel any fatigue, because I was also concerned, am I going to get fatigued on my thumb, start, getting some kind of carpal tunnels or something like that. But that wasn't an issue. I played for hours. I think it was Saturday night, and then Friday night and Saturday night. So no issues whatsoever. In regards to the tension on that note. In fact, there was some settings on the left stick that I was kind of thinking I would like to go ahead and get the extreme on the left. But because of the con that I ran into about the thumbsticks on the right, I'm not sure I want to do that, which is going to get into the later part of the video. But I'm going to talk about the con right now. So if you do decide to go with increased thumbstick tension, something you need to be aware of, and I really think Beaver should probably notate this on their website, on their thumbstick tension setting when you go to build your controller, because there are people on there that don't know what this is, and they may get it because they want to try it out like I did. Fortunately, I did a bit of homework and I was able to find this out beforehand. But when you increase the thumbstick tension on these, it increases the button press tension as well. So it takes a lot more force to press the R3 button on this right thumbstick, like a lot more. And some people, use that a lot. So if that's the case, that could be a problem for you. Now, for me, it's fine. I don't have any particular problems with it, but I am going to be moving on to some other modifications. I'm going to stop this clip and start another one because I'm about to run out of juice on this one. Okay, we're back. So eventually I'll be switching cameras, so hopefully I won't be having to do that, and hopefully not be running as long of videos as well. So just be aware of the fact that if you go with the higher tension, it's going to make it much more difficult to press that thumbstick button. I want to get it on the left, but I've got to see if they can add the extra mod that I want. And if they can, then I'm going to go ahead and get the extreme tension on the left as well, because I really like how it feels. And I'll kind of try to demonstrate this. Like, I'm going to pull the left one all the way over and let it spring back, and maybe you can see a little bit of it. And then the right. See how fast it springs back? It's because it's got a lot more tension. Now, again, you guys don't really know because you haven't felt it yet, unless you've already used one with that. And if you have, then you probably don't need to be watching the video. But for those who haven't, there you go. The grip, I don't really need to talk about the grip. The Battle Beaver does offer the squid grip. I didn't want to go with it because it adds more bulk to the controller. And I don't want the controller, I don't want it becoming like an Xbox controller where it's this huge thing, you know. I like the size of the PlayStation controller. I like the way it feels. So, and I really liked this grip, as I mentioned before, so I just stuck with that. Okay, moving on to the home button, the share, and options buttons. The home button, nothing real special to talk about. They offer your custom coloring. I went with the black. I was happy with that. The only con that I can really talk of is they didn't offer a matte black to match the rest of the buttons. Wish they would have been able to offer me that, but unfortunately they didn't have it for whatever reason. Now the share and options buttons. Now this is something that I was kind of lucky on because if you notice on the stock controller share and options buttons, they're like a gray. And not only are they gray, but they're also flush with the surface of the controller face. And when I'm playing, and I generally play in a fairly dark room with the screen going, just helps with the immersion. Sometimes I need to take my thumb off the thumbstick to, hit the options or the share. And it can be a little difficult to find because they're flush. They're flush with the face. So I asked Battle Beaver, they don't offer this on their build site. When you go to build the controller, this is not something that's offered there. You have to email them or put it in the notes when you make your build. And that doesn't guarantee they're going to be able to do it, but they were able to do it for me. So I asked them to raise the buttons so that way I could feel them better. And not only that, I also wanted black matching matte buttons to match the rest of the face buttons. Now, originally they told me they couldn't do it because of the way the buttons were integrated with the new controller. So I was like, no problems. If you can do it, great. If not, that's cool. But they surprised me the day that they shipped it. They said they were able to get it to work. So I was like, awesome. As far as cons on the share and options buttons, normally they only offer the stock gray. Now I don't know if they're going to continue to offer something like what I requested, or if I was just like a special case, they were just able to do it because right time, right place, whatever. But that's really the only con. Because a lot of people, I would think, if you're getting a button scheme on your controller, you want all the buttons to match. You want your home button, your D-pad, your front face, and your share and option buttons to all match up. And unfortunately, when you go through the button schemes, they don't, at least when I was going through it, they don't offer that. You have to go through each individual one, and some of them aren't offered. Like the home button on this only came glossy. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it's not, too terribly noticeable, but I do notice it in person. Again, attention to detail. It's just aesthetics though. Okay, now moving on to my experience, playing with this controller on the PC, on my Nintendo Switch, and my PS4. For those of you who have been watching my videos, I had already owned a Nintendo Switch, which I bought at the end of summer after I did research. And I finally pulled the trigger on a PlayStation 4 only because I was able to get a Black Friday deal. I got the PlayStation 4 for $200 with a free copy of Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm kind of anti-console, but not because I hate console. I just, I get a lot of, I get pretty much most of my gaming needs met on a PC. So there really isn't a lot of need to own a console. However, there are exclusives to the Nintendo, exclusives to the PlayStation 4, and there were a lot of them, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there were a few of them that I really wanted to play, but I didn't want to spend or drop, $400 for a console just to play 2 or 3 games or 4 or 5 games. But since I was able to get the PlayStation reduced, I went ahead and pulled the trigger. The Nintendo, different story, because there's a lot more exclusives that are available and there's more coming, so I didn't have a problem with that. Plus, it's portable. Okay, so as far as my play experience with it, it's amazing. Far better than my experience with the Evil Shift. This thing just, it feels good. The weight's good. I had them leave in the rumble motors, so I'm getting the immersion with that. All the buttons just feel better. The thumbsticks with the tensions and everything, the smart bumpers, the triggers, the rear button placement on the rear. It just, like Jim Carrey would say, fits like a glove. It does. Really, really, really pleased with it. And it performed well wired and wirelessly. I mostly play wirelessly, but I went ahead and hooked up the wire as well. Now moving into the next section, customer service. How's Battle Beaver? It's customer service. I got to be honest. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's excellent. It's not perfect, but it's excellent. Now let's talk about the pros. The pros are they provide good customer service. They're easy to get a hold of. You email them, they're going to respond. Every time I emailed them, and I emailed them a lot, they responded every time within 24 hours. Every single time. I don't think there was a time that it went over that, except maybe weekends. But I don't even remember if I emailed them on the weekend or not. Actually, I did, but it was fine because I knew they would email me on Monday. The other pro that I really like is, and this probably won't matter to some of you, but it matters to me, they're based here in Texas, and I'm here in Texas. I'm born and raised, proud Texan. So I'm glad that they're here in Texas. The turnaround for shipping and receiving was really good with them. I shipped them my parts for my faceplate and my rear plate. I shipped them on Saturday. They got them on Monday. They had my controller built Tuesday. They shipped it Tuesday night. I ended up getting it Thursday afternoon. So yeah, really, really happy they're based in Texas. Now, again, for some of you who are out of Texas, that's not really going to benefit you much. Okay, now getting into the cons. There are a few cons, but nothing that I would consider a deal breaker. They don't offer any kind of phone support. Now, I don't mean phone support like you need technical support. That's not what I mean. Well, sort of. I ran into a problem with not having phone support because I tried to talk with them over email about using a Pro controller with the Steam software. Now, this was before I learned that the DS4 controller, with any additional buttons with remapping, that all the buttons are cloned. Now that I know that, if I'd have known that prior, I would not have needed to, be contacting them back and forth so much. But they didn't know either. At least none of the reps that I spoke to didn't know, because I tried to explain to them what the difference between cloned buttons and independent buttons were, and they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what I was talking about. So I explained it to them as I explained to you guys earlier, and I explained to them the Steam software, or even if you're using DS4 Windows, which you can use, it's good, but I use Steam, and they just didn't get it. In fact, and then I had some of them emailing me back saying that they were cloned. I had some emailing me back saying they were independent. And I said, look, man, I need to know for sure one way or the other. I'm going to be dropping $200+ on this controller. And if they're not cloned, the controller's kind of useless to me. So I need to know. I said, here's my number. Just call me. We can spend 5 minutes on the phone and I can explain it to you, better than I can do it in an email. Because either I'm not communicating myself well in the email or whatever. I don't care. But they didn't want to do it. Guess they're scarce on the phone, whatever. So that's a bit of a con. Normally, an average person probably doesn't need to be calling them, but I'm one of these types of, unorthodox people. I like to break rules. I like to think outside the box. I like to, if something, is meant to go one way, I try to find a way to make it work another way. That's the artist in me. That's what we do. So when I go into like the Steam software, there's things in that software that I'm able to do that you can't do in any other game or any other software. And, it's just a matter of learning how to do it and trying to explain it to somebody who doesn't really understand what I'm talking about on an email doesn't really work. So a 5-minute phone call would have saved us the 10 emails that we had to send back and forth, and not to mention the time waiting to figure out what's what. So it got a bit frustrating on both sides, I can imagine. But on that situation, or a situation, that could be similar for another customer, phone support would be nice. And I can understand they probably don't have a lot of time, so maybe a compromise. Have it where an individual can call in, leave their name and number, and they can call back at their convenience. Because, obviously they're busy, they have a business to run, and just, maybe do something like that. But, I guess it's kind of hard because then you got people that call in for the most random things that are just like, they're being lazy. They don't want to go on the website and read their website. So they call in and they waste their time. So I get why they don't want to do the phone support, but it's because of that it causes problems for people who do have legit questions that there's nothing on their website that's going to answer it or any YouTube video. Because believe me, I always Google or YouTube something before I go to their website before I try to go to a phone or email. I generally will do that, but a lot of people are lazy and they don't want to do that. So I can understand why they don't to a certain extent. Anyways, I went down a rabbit hole that I shouldn't have. The other con is you generally speak to a new rep every single time in the email. That was another problem when I was trying to figure out this issue with the buttons and whatnot, because I spoke to one rep and then they responded, or I sent the email, a rep responded back. I could see based on the response, they had no clue what they were talking about or what I was trying to communicate. So I responded back to try again to explain. And then it ended up going to another rep. They didn't know what the hell I was talking about, So I was like, oh, and that kept going on back and forth for several emails before finally somebody figured it out of what I was trying to communicate. And they said, that they were actually cloned. I was like, because I was about to create a YouTube video because they wouldn't talk to me on the phone, and email them a link to the YouTube video and say, watch the damn video since you won't talk to me on the phone, and then email me my answer. Sorry, I was a bit frustrated because, like I said, in situations like that, phone support is necessary. Anyways, moving on. Price point. Is the Battle Beaver worth what I paid? Yes, it is, and probably more. I have no hesitation or issues with what I paid for this controller. I actually got a discount on this controller because it was Black Friday. I saved about $40. Very, very pleased. No issues there. Next category, and leads me into the final for the closing of this review. Do I recommend Battle Beaver controllers? Yes, absolutely. Would I recommend them over Evil controllers? Yes, I would. Even if the shift buttons are a better fit for you, the build quality of what you're going to get out of the Battle Beaver controller it's just much better quality. Much better quality. I would only go with the Evil Shift controller if your hands were, if you got big hands and you just need these shift buttons. It's just going to work better for you. Of course, the only way you're going to know is if you order it. Good luck returning it because you're never going to get a hold of them. So that kind of wraps up my review of my Battle Beaver controller. Now, for those of you who do want to stick around, I do have something I want to talk about in regards to the modifications I want to have done to this controller. These are modifications that I could not have known until I actually got the controller and used it. So, number one, I want to have these buttons replaced with black buttons. I'm also, while they're doing that, I'm going to have them migrate these standard buttons a little bit higher up because I was having a little bit of trouble sometimes where even though when I'm holding it, if you look there, my middle finger and ring finger, they line up pretty well, but there were certain situations where I'd be trying to pull off a combo or something in a specific game, and the button's just a little bit too close. I didn't really want to go with the medium because that was too far up. So I need something a bit in between the standard and the medium. So I'm going to go ahead and have them migrate them up a little bit. I got a new backplate on order. Should be here in a couple of days. That's that mod. The other thing I want to do is if they can relocate the L3 and R3 buttons to another button on the controller, not another button, but create another button, add another button to my specification as far as location, then I want to go ahead and get the extreme tension put on the left thumbstick. Because pressing these, like I said, you can still use them, but it's very difficult to use. So what I want to do is I want to have them, I don't think they can do this. I'm hoping they can, but I don't think they can. I want to see if they can add the R3 button here, and then the L3 over here. And the reason why is if I'm holding the controller, I put it in a place where my index first knuckle here, actually, if I'm curled over the bumper and trigger, trying to get in the frame there, is just right underneath it. And if I press down on it, I'll be able to depress it. And if I press, together, I'll be able to press both at the same time if I need to. So that's a good location. I don't think they'll be able to do it though. I don't know. I emailed them the photo today to see if they can make that mod. And the reason why I don't think they can do it is because I think it's going to interfere with the trigger or the bumper and the trigger. And the first place I was thinking was adding it down here and putting my pinkies on it. And I know I said I had problems with my pinkies, but that was because I was using my pinkies for jump. And I was pressing jump like 60% of the time. But the L3 and the R3 button, those buttons only get used maybe 10%. So I'm not going to kill my pinky playing that. But the problem with putting it down below and putting it in my pinky is I hold my controller with my pinky because I'm using my ring finger and middle finger to press the buttons on the back. So I'm not quite sure if I'll be able to come up with an option for relocating these buttons, just basically cloning them and relocating them to the side over here. If not, I may just have to go down here. So that's another mod. The final mod that I want to have done is, for some of you who are aware, I brought to y'all's attention that I found some mod sticks, but I didn't want to get them for two reasons. Number one, they were anodized blue. I didn't want blue. I wanted either black, silver, or red. And they didn't have any of those. The guy went out of business and is MIA. Nobody's heard from him, so they don't know, what's up with him. But the shaft diameter is roughly about the same size on the mod sticks as the evil sticks. And they're also aluminum, they're metal, so less chances of them breaking. But because they were blue and because they were for the Xbox One, at the time, I didn't know or think the Xbox One sticks would work on a DS4 controller. They do. I did research. You can take an Xbox One controller, any controller, and those thumbsticks will fit and work inside a DS4 controller. So now that I knew that they would work, I was just like, well, do I want blue thumbsticks? Not really. And I didn't want to paint them. I could maybe paint them, but I was a little concerned with, is the paint going to get scratched? Because with the mod sticks, they actually don't do this. Like they're not going to be open. They're going to be like this, where it's sealed. And I don't know if it end up scratching on the inside of the surface. I don't know because I haven't had a chance to play with them. Anyways, I decided, maybe what I could do is have them chrome plated. So I called my local metal plating company and I talked to one of the gentlemen there and I explained to him that I had some pieces that I maybe wanted to get chrome plated. They were aluminum. And he said, sure, you bring it on down. And he started to explain the process. He said first thing he would do is he'd remove the anodized blue tint to them. And I said, well, can we stop right there for a second? And he's like, sure. I said, you can remove the anodized blue from the aluminum. And he said, yes. And I was just like, you know, when I was a kid, I used to race BMX, and we used to do custom bikes back then. And we had, you know, titanium and aluminum, all these different parts. And we used a lot of aluminum, and we had a lot of anodized aluminum. And when I took parts in to have chrome plated, none of them ever told me that the anodization could be removed. So I didn't think that it could be. And he says it can. So I was just like, okay, if you can remove it, what's it going to look like? He says when he removes it, it's going to take it down to the original aluminum color, and then he will polish it. And in fact, that I don't even really need to chrome plate it. It'll look chrome or shiny enough to where it almost looks chrome. So I was like, hey, that works. So now that I know the Xbox mod sticks will be compatible with the controller, I can get the blue removed. I'll probably have silver sticks. Would prefer black, but I'll live with silver. I'll be able to go with the mod sticks. So that's another modification that I want to have them do when I send in this controller for these alterations that I want to have changed. And I can't install them myself, not without voiding the warranty. So I don't want to do that. Plus, I'm not ready to grab my nutsack and jump into disassembling the controller, especially one this expensive. When I start learning or teaching myself how to take apart these controllers and put them back together, I'm going to buy a broken controller, probably on Craigslist for like $5. They sell them for, you know, real cheap. And I'm just going to take it apart, put it together again, and get comfortable with, you know, assembling and disassembling and reassembling it, and then moving into, you know, actually using a stock controller and modding that. Just that way I don't screw something up that I don't mean to. So I'm going to go ahead and have them install those sticks for me. So going to have them do the sticks, probably, hopefully get the thumbstick tension done, change out the color to black, have them migrate the standard up a little bit. And I think that's it. Now, I emailed them about this. I don't know if I can get it in focus here. Let's see if I can focus. Okay. If you see that little star screw there, that's like a key. Now, I did find the socket for that if I wanted to remove it. I haven't done so, and I'm not going to until after my warranty is done, and only if I need to open the controller, like if it breaks. But I don't know why they did that. My guess is they did it for maybe warranty issues, because, like, you know, some companies put like special screws to either prevent, you know, consumers from opening them up or whatever, to voiding the warranty or whatever. I don't know. I did email them about that when I asked about these modifications I want done, just so I know what it's for, and I'm sure you guys are going to want to know. So once I have an answer on that, I'll put it in the comments below. I think that's pretty much it as far as this controller. One last thing before I sign off on this video. Some of you guys have been asking, how do you swap out the Evil sticks from the controller? Okay. This is my Evil Shift controller. It's going to be the same on this controller as well. All you do is you take the controller, take the stick, and you just pull straight out. That's all you do. You just pull straight out, and that shows basically right there the rocker mechanism. And if you can see there, there's like a key which matches up with the key there. And then to put them on, you know, you just line up the key and then press down. Now, when I got this Evil Shift controller, this right thumbstick was the tall one that's on there now, which I don't use the talls. You know, playing with these tall thumbsticks just feels weird to me. You know, maybe, like, since I got the higher tension, I could probably go with a taller thumbstick, and it may work out better. I need to try that out. But when you have thumbsticks this loose, because this is the stock 75 grams, I mean, you're all over the place, especially if you got taller thumbsticks. So that does not help. So yeah, that's pretty much how you take them out and remove them. But like I said, mine was stuck on there so tight, I thought I was going to rip the rocker out. It was really tight. Like I was pulling on thing, and I stopped doing it because I didn't want to force it. Went online, researched it, thought maybe you need to twist and pull or something like that. No, you just pull straight out, and then pop it back in and put it on. But these are considered interchangeable. Not the best system. When you guys see my mod sticks, I'll be getting those. I'll be getting the mod sticks, I believe, this week. And I'll go ahead and do a short video on those so you can get an idea what they look like. The system, the thumbstick system, I mean, it's awesome. Like, it's really cool. Like, I've explained it, but for those of you, it's better to see what they can do. But they're fully adjustable. You're not, like with these thumbsticks, like if you notice, I've got the short ones on my Battle Beaver, and I got the long ones on my Evil Shift. Okay, you have the choice between switching from those two heights. Well, there's three. But with the mod sticks, you can have any height you want pretty much. I mean, within reason, of course, because you use a threaded shaft with washers. So you can get it precisely exactly the way you want. Maybe your hands, all of us are a bit asymmetrical. Maybe your right hand is a little larger than your left, or maybe a lot larger. Maybe you want a taller thumbstick, or vice versa. So with those mod sticks, and the fact that they're metal, aside from them maybe stripping out, being stolen, or damaged in a fire or something like that, they're going to last. They're not going to, these things are going to break eventually. You have a night, countless nights where you're playing with these. Over time, this plastic is going to break. Those mod sticks, not the case. It's metal. They're rock solid. So, I've seen many videos on these before I pulled the trigger. So I'm pretty confident they're made to last. Okay, guys, that's my video. Tried to make it shorter. Didn't exactly work out, but the review was a bit shorter. You have any questions or concerns, you know what to do. Like, dislike. If you disliked, I'd appreciate any constructive criticism, feedback in the comments below. I make mistakes all the time. I'm always learning from my mistakes. Feel free to point them out. I will do my best to make corrections. If you're so inclined, please also subscribe. I do plan on doing more videos in the future. I'm enjoying the video process, and when once I get my video machine up and running, they'll be a little bit more professional, a bit shorter. I'm going to be making videos on how to use the Steam software with a Pro controller like this. There are some other people that do make Steam software videos, but I want to take it a step further in a direction that they have not. But they're still good people to check out. I'll, eventually when that time comes, I'll put their links in the description. And I'm also wanting to start doing videos on how to start building and repairing Pro controllers. Okay, that's it, guys. See you on the next one. Happy gaming.